What's going on, regulars? Welcome back on another Thursday. We're back, Bobby.
It's your boy Bobby. What's going on, Caitlin?
It feels like it's been 100 years since we've sat down and recorded.
Yeah. I mean, we took a week break, which you guys know from last week's episode and whatnot, but we recorded the intro, a little later and whatnot and finished that, but it feels like it's been
I think it's been, like 2 weeks, maybe?
for like 47 days. It
Yeah.
feels like, I'm like, oh my gosh, do I know what I'm doing anymore?
Yeah, we actually came down to the place that we recorded last night. We had a little party for Bobby for his birthday.
Ugh.
And we walked down here just to show people our setup. And I was like, I feel like we haven't been down here in so long.
Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah, first things first, thank you for everyone who showed up to the party. It was supposed to be a surprise. It kind
we were
of
so
unfolded.
close.
It was very close. I will say it was very close. It kind of unfolded the last minute, but nonetheless, everybody showed up and we had a good time. Everyone was kicking it, just having fun, vibing.
Well, I have to point out, it was like the most Bobby thing ever. So his mom and I are pretty close, and she actually shot me an email, like probably a month ago. She's like, hey, I want to plan a party for Bobby for his 30th. Can you help me get together a list of, a small group of people? And at first of all, I'm like, a small group of Bobby's friends. Like, dude, does that even exist? Like, you have 9
No.
million friends. So I'm like, okay, I got to think like lifelong friends that you've known forever. Like, who are they? So we start planning and whatnot. And then, like, probably 3 or 4 days later, Bobby texts me. He's like, hey, I'm having a party for my birthday at my parents' house. Like, a week later, I'm like, okay. Plot twist.
Yeah, plot twist. So there are 2 parties for my birthday. And it's funny because I actually don't care about celebrating my birthday at
know.
all. Like, I'm not a birthday person. Like, I'll celebrate your birthday.
Damn right you will.
But I don't really care about my birthday. Like, normally we just go out, have dinner. My mom will make a cake, we'll sing happy birthday, blow out some candles, and that's pretty much it. And I go home and I wake up the next day a year earlier, and that's it. But or a year older. But yeah, I don't really care. So this year I was like, you know what? Like, I'm turning 30. You know what I mean? The dirty 30.
It's a big one.
Yeah. Well, it's not even just so much of like 30. From 29 to 30, like just that year has been so big for me as like a person. Like you could add up the amount of things that I learned in my first 29, and then from 29 to 30 surpasses that like so much. And it's been such an impactful year. So I was like, you know what? Like let's get after it this one.
Good for you.
So
and then we really got after it, or we're about to get after it twice. So.
Exactly. Yeah. So by the time this episode airs, I'll be 1, 2, 3 days away from 30.
It's crazy that your family too, like your whole family, not your whole, but your father's birthday is like a week and a half before yours, right? And then you share your birthday with your niece.
Absolutely.
So it's like everyone's celebrating in May.
And then my best friend, and then Mike, who was on 2 episodes ago. His birthday's the same day as mine.
That's wild.
Jesus. And then the trainer at my gym, he's the 14th, and then our other buddy that we work out with is the 16th. We literally have like the weekend booked out.
That's wild.
Yeah, they'll be here
insane.
and stuff like that. So.
Fun fact, my high school boyfriend's birthday is May 14th, and then the boyfriend that I had right after him, like 6 months later in college, his birthday was May 15th.
Oh my god!
And now that's your birthday as well.
Oh
so,
my gosh,
pretty wild.
yeah. May is a great month.
Yeah.
Let's just put it that way. But let's talk about last week's episode a little bit.
Yes. Still chills.
Yeah, I actually just got goosebumps again. Again, we cannot thank Jake and Joel and the Your Life Gym and even Heart Support as well too for giving us these tools to really focus on mental health and everything. And it was such an experience. When that episode dropped, people were tagging us. I was getting text message, and it
all
was
the DMs.
Oh my gosh, it was like everyone was blowing up. Joe putting the video together that him, Cody, and Matt worked on.
The whole day was just like it's interesting because I think Bobby and I had different experiences with like how we digested that day. So I'm very much like in the moment, part of my sleeve, and that whole day, it was an interesting weekend for me personally. We had a lot going on to prep. Like that week, we were just wild. Like we were
Hmm.
talking about questions, we were getting together merch. Like we were just doing a lot to get everything in line, like making sure we had cameramen and all that kind of stuff. And then Joey was out here. We recorded with him that Saturday. And I, on top of that, was working crazy hours at my part time job for different reasons. And then we get up and we go, and emotions are high. And Bobby's very much like a planner, right? So he
Very
sees,
East Coast.
yeah, like
Mhm.
sees the plan laid out, and like he doesn't veer off track at all while the plan's still being executed. Like he's just very much like, eye on the prize, stay focused, whatever, which is part of why we work so great together, because I'm like, squirrel, and then I start crying because I'm like, I love squirrels.
Yeah, right.
So the day of, the moment we finished recording, it was a mixture of me being exhausted because we had just been working our asses off that week, both for the podcast and on our side jobs as well. Um, but I looked at Bobby as we're sitting in the war room, which is where we recorded that episode. And Jake and Joel had just left the room, and we kind of like did this like silent, like, fuck yeah, oh my God.
Mm.
It was like a little celebration. And I look at him and I start to like tear up a little bit. And I'm like, I just can't even, like, I don't even have words for how I feel right now. Like, thank you so much for bringing me on to this. Like, this day was just like everything I needed. And I start to tear up. And like, of course, Bobby's like, still has a checklist of things we need to do before the episode goes out. So he looks at me and goes, puts his hand up and goes, we can cry later. I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck, dude, come
Yeah, we can
on.
cry later. Like we're gonna do it. It's fine.
So that was like what, 3 plus weeks ago. And then the episode drops, and I've kind of already had my like, oh my God, emotional, because I cried pretty much that whole day afterwards, because I was just so like, I'm in the right place. I'm doing exactly what I should be doing. Like, life has led me here, all those warm fuzzies. And then comes this past Thursday when the episode drops, and Bobby's hitting me with paragraphs and paragraphs of the warm fuzzies. I'm like, oh, now we're cute. Now we can cry.
Yeah, it was because what it was like when Caitlin, first reacted, in my head, I was like, there's still so much work that needs to be done for this. You know what I mean? This is a really big episode. This is a really important episode. And I know that this is half the battle. You know what I mean? I was like, I was still in war mode. You know what I mean? And finally, like when the episode released and this, that, and the other thing, it kind of actually goes back into what Jake said, where he was like, my job is to enrich the soil of this community, and then their success is like our reward. And it was like, okay, we enriched this soil with this episode, and whatnot, and then everybody reaching out saying how powerful it was to them, like, and this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, this is it, like,
Yeah.
this is why. And
Hmm.
um I'll get into why I think it hit me later on. I wrote this paragraph to Caitlin, and with tears running down my face and I probably get choked up as I read it,
I
but
can see the goosebumps on
yeah,
your tattoo right now. Like I can
yeah,
see that, watch them rising. And let me preface this too. Bobby is not like a really, I mean, he's definitely in touch with his emotions, and he's compassionate, but I try and pull some tears and stuff out of him, and he's not a crier like by any means at
no, no,
all.
not at all, not at all. But I wrote this to her. I said, she asked me, she's like, talk to me about what feels different about like what it was that day, or why, on Thursday when the episode dropped, why you're feeling this way. And I said, there wasn't a single person who was involved in this from start to finish who wasn't passionate about what we were there to do. The subject of the episode impacts every single one of us involved, and anyone ever from any walk of life can find value in that episode. I don't care if you're white, black, gay, straight, trans, orange, purple, you identify as a moose, it does not matter. If you listen to that episode, there's no way, it is absolutely impossible for you to not take something from it and feel better. Everyone in that day went in there with their own purpose, whether they knew it or not. Joe thought he was there to shoot some video. Matt and Cody thought that they were there to just help Joe assist with some photos and video. Jake and Joel may have thought that they were in some amateurs podcast just to talk. We thought we were in over our heads doing something really cool. We did so much more than that. We all went in there thinking we were doing something this big, when we did quite the opposite. We changed lives. And that was like,
Boom. And you could feel it too, like the energy in the room. Like when we got there, like I'm getting like, oh. When we
yeah.
got there, we literally were just like, all right, like when you do something that you you don't really know what it's gonna look like, but you just want to make sure that you look like you know what you're doing. So I feel like we walked in there and we were just like, all right, like eyes on the prize, just sell it. We don't know what the fuck we're doing, but just make it look like we do. And then the more that we did, the more that it kind of felt like I felt like we were dressing up as characters, and then we just like became the characters. And like all of a sudden, it didn't feel like we were pretending
We were
to,
doing what we were
yeah.
supposed to be
And
doing.
then the conversation started, and it was just like you could physically feel the energy in the room was
Mhm.
just intense and like passionate and inspirational. And it was like even at one point we took a break and I was walking to the bathroom next to Jake Lors, and I'm like, what the hell am I going to talk to this man about while we walk down the hallway to the bathroom, which is a pretty long hallway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is, and then we just started like firing away, and it was just so natural, so easy. And we're talking about things about heart support in the episode. And in that moment, I realized like, we're all here to do the same thing, even though we're not doing it the same way. Like, we are all in some kind of way looking to achieve similar goals. And it was just so obvious in that room to all
Mhm.
four of us, I think.
Yeah.
And our production team as well. So
I can't, again, shout out to Matt, Cody, Joe. I had a vision for what that episode was going to look like. Yeah, there was a long pause there because I can't come up with it was nothing what I thought it was going to be
No.
for all the right
Yeah,
reasons.
so much better.
It was awesome. So again, thank you from Jake to Joel to Your Life to Joe, Matt, Cody. Thank you.
Amen. So I guess we can get into some life updates. I feel like we haven't really talked about ourselves in a while. And also,
No.
you and I haven't really hung out before last night in quite a bit either. So how the hell are you, Bobby?
I am great. I'm on top of the world. A lot of what we just discussed as far as last week's episode was a big weight off of my shoulders as far as just planning and just work, just labor work. But speaking of regular work, like I'm crushing it there. It's going so well. I picked up running in the morning, which has been an interesting activity.
I'm shocked that you're running, first of all, because you don't really like it.
Fucking hate it. I absolutely hate running. I don't enjoy it at all, but like I do it and I force myself to do it and I do feel better. Like and I feel good.
I can tell, and I said this to you this week, like especially in your reactions to me, like when I give you an excuse about something or I just unload one of my crazy ass like monologues of insanity to you.
mhm.
You've been so positive and supportive. And in my head, first of all, I'm like, is he getting laid and I don't know about it? Like, first of all, like,
No.
we know way too much about each other's lives. So I'm like, I would know if you were fucking somebody. I'm like, what is it? And then I'm like, you know what? I think it's the fucking running. I really
Yeah.
do.
It maybe, I don't
I think that
know.
it is.
Maybe we should talk to Joel, see if that has something to do with
Because
it.
I mean, you work out pretty regularly. So I'm wondering
Yeah.
if it's like just a different kind of endorphins or something.
I
I
have
don't
no
know.
idea. I mean, maybe it's I'm waking up at 6 a.m. and I'm just getting up and getting after it and then going to work, then lifting after work. So like I don't know, maybe
And you normally wake up early regardless, though, right?
I just don't sleep. But
Right, but
that's
I feel like
all.
you're getting up and doing something productive now versus like just kind of laying there and being like, "Well, I'm awake."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm awake and time to go to work. Yeah, so there's that. One of the funnest things that I've done in a very long time was I actually got to go wrestle, which as most of you already know, I wrestled my entire life. And it's been 7 years since I laced up my shoes and got on the mat, which I was telling Caitlin before, like I haven't not done anything in my life for 7 years. You know what I mean? Like
So that was the first time you had ever, not
step,
ever, the first time you had wrestled in 7 years.
yeah, like
Can I
at
ask
all.
like what like made you want to do that? This was just for fun, just to like,
Well, a mutual friend, or a friend of mine, her boyfriend coaches at Rider University, and him and I were just shooting the shit and kind of talking about wrestling. We just had the NCAA finals. Rider put their first wrestler in the NCAA finals in school history. The Olympic qualifiers were just so we were just kind of shooting the shit about that. And then I was like, man, if you ever have like an open mat, like let me know. Like I'm down to roll and whatnot. And
is an open mat like people can just go wrestle.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Or if you know a place, that's holding a practice or something like that. And then we were just shooting the shit one day, and he was like, "Yo, man, you want to roll?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "All right, cool. I got a place on Sunday." And I was like, "Let's do it." Then
Is
he
that
went,
like a term? Want to roll is like wrestle?
yeah, like sparring, whatever you want to call it.
I don't know any of that.
Combat terms, but yeah, so he was just like, I was like, all right, let's do this. And we went down, and it was so much fun. Like, he was teaching me technique, which I have not been taught wrestling technique since I stopped competitively wrestling when I was 18 years old.
Wow.
So like, and it was really cool. Drew, shout out to Drew. I mean, he great guy, and we had so much fun. Got some pizza afterwards because this is 30. You can't like exercise and not reward yourself, right? So that was probably one of the biggest highlights that I've had over the last couple of weeks, was just getting back on the mat and just feeling what it's like to just manipulate somebody, you know what I mean? And like physically
I was like,
manipulate
wait,
them.
what?
Yeah.
I was like, I thought this is a mental health
Yeah, right. Yeah.
podcast.
No. Like, physically manipulate somebody into making them do what you want, and it was
That
it was
also
just cool.
sounds bad, but I know what you mean.
Yeah, if you know wrestling, it's combat, bro. You know what I mean? So it was just so much fun. So, and I can't wait. And him and I had a great time. And he was like, "Dude, whenever you're down whenever you're down, we'll do it again." So I can't wait. I'm excited,
That's
excited to get back
awesome.
on.
You
So
look like I feel like you. I don't know if you realize it or not, but you look like lighter and brighter. I think.
lighter and brighter.
Yeah.
I've only gained weight, so
Well, I mean, just like the energy you're
yeah,
exuding just
I know.
looks. You look happy. You look like you're. Whatever you're doing is.
Feeling myself.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That's like not a bad way to go into 30 though. A lot of people go into 30 like, man, I'm old. I didn't do shit. You know
This is
what
the
I mean?
back half of my life, so might as well go on with a smile.
I love it.
What about you?
Any ladies in your life? Can I ask?
What's that?
Any ladies in your life? No. I mean, I knew the answer to that, but I
Yeah.
just figured we have to give. I'm gonna give relationship updates, so I figured that I would ask you and be
Yeah,
nice.
mine's just silent. Any ladies? Silence. Caitlin, any relationship updates? And monologue starts now.
Okay, well, before I get into that piece of it, I would like to say that today is an important day for me, and I haven't actually shared this with you. Today marks 1 year that I moved back to our hometown, Lansdale. I moved out of my apartment with my ex-boyfriend. So I've officially been home for 1 year now, which
Oh,
is
nice.
it's it's just crazy to think exactly what you said, like how much can happen in a year. Holy shit.
Yeah, exactly.
And especially the last year, I feel like everyone can kind of relate to this, like from the pandemic and just life's been like the presidential election, all kinds of shit, like all of the social justice things going on, and then everyone how they're responding to them personally. There's just been so much, right? I'm kind of looking at it like, wow. I remember a year ago, just moving out in general was a big thing for me. For those who don't know, the relationship was on and off for almost 6 years. So leaving was kind of like, okay, I've done this before, right? Like this was my second time having lived with this person, second time moving out of an apartment. And this was the person that I thought that I was going to marry and spend the rest of my life with and have children with. And here I am, 28 years old, leaving Philadelphia, this place that I had always dreamt of building my life in, and moving back to my hometown, into my parents' house, into my bedroom that I grew up in. The walls are still purple. There's still a fucking lame ass quote on the wall. Like, it's just like not where I saw myself at 28, especially during a pandemic, right? So I'm like, I packed up a U-Haul by myself, 100%. Every single thing that I owned alone, moved. I drove a fucking U-Haul, which if anybody knows, I suck at driving. So like that
She's horrible.
it was terrifying. Like my whole life is in this truck and I'm driving it. But like what a metaphor, right? Like that was just a lot. So I didn't even realize that the year mark was coming up until a couple of days ago. And I looked at it and I was kind of just like, I always wondered when I left, like what a year was going to do for me. And I had this like crazy vision of where I'd be and what I'd be doing. And am I there? No. But like, holy shit, like I'm not where I was a year ago. And I never thought that the things that I'm doing right now are what I'd be doing. And just the mental growth that I've had and still continue to have all the time is it's great. I'm really happy, and I feel like this past week with the episode drop just was a nice reminder of like, I am where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing things that I'm passionate about. And like you said, the people that reach out, I feel like that is what drives us to do what we do.
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
and it's makes, even if it's just something small, like,
Great episode.
yeah, or like, whatever you said, it really resonated with me, whether they give us an example or not, whether it's a 3-paragraph text or, like you said, one line. Like, it's that really impacts us a lot because the episodes mean a lot to us when we produce them, but the feedback that we get, I feel like, is really like, okay, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's like it's reassuring that this is what we're supposed to be doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? This is the impact that we're supposed to make.
Right. So yeah, so with all that said, ladies and gentlemen, drum roll. I have a boyfriend.
Oh my God. Poor guy.
Yeah, so that's a sentence I did not think I'd be saying for a while, but I do.
I do.
I do have one of those boyfriends. So
good for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this. Getting out of a toxic relationship, wow, like it teaches you. It's hard because there's parts of it where you have to look at yourself. And I think a lot of it too, when there is like manipulation and gaslighting and like lying and years and years and years of that built up, there's so many parts of it that you have to deconstruct, like looking at which parts were your fault, which parts weren't your fault, which parts were you made to believe were your fault that actually weren't. Like, your perception of reality gets so skewed, and like it's just kind of hard to look at things and know what was real and what was not. And I think I spent so much time in that trying to like sift through the past that I didn't realize how much it was going to affect my present moving forward, because I thought if I could kind of like figure out all that shit and put it in its place, once I moved forward, like, I'd be good. And that's what I've been doing a lot in therapy. But getting into a new relationship is hard after you've been through a shitty one for so long, because it's like you're learning which areas you do need to work on. And like, that's tough, being like, okay, well, I've done all this work and I finally got out of that bad thing. But now
you're kind of starting with a clean slate. You're like, what the hell am I doing?
Yeah, and I thought that clean slate would be great. Like, I can just be who I am and that'll be enough, which it's getting there, but it's also brought to light like, oh shit, like there are some parts that I need to work on in a relationship. Like, I'm not the perfect girlfriend that I thought that I was, you know what I mean? So that's been enlightening for sure.
Yeah, tune in next week to see how she feels.
Yeah, so it's been good, but I think I'm learning as I go, and holy shit, it's, stay tuned.
It's work.
It is work, but I'll put it this way.
It's good work.
Yeah,
it's good work.
I always thought that so when someone makes you believe that things are your fault for so long, and then you finally realize that maybe they weren't your fault, it almost makes it scary to start thinking that like even one small thing could have been my fault. I can't really explain it much more than that, but the difference now is I'm like more open to seeing things that I am doing wrong, whereas before I felt like if I was found guilty of anything bad, it was the end of the world. And like, I was at fault for all the bad things in the relationship, and it was like that was a weight that I just couldn't carry. Whereas now I'm like, okay, yeah, I did this thing, or I handled this situation poorly, like that's on me. I definitely screwed that up, but like, let's talk about how we can not have that happen again. Yeah. So it's been a learning experience, but I'm excited and I'm very, very happy. And yeah.
Well, there was a 25-minute life update. Now that you're all caught up,
we'll talk to you next week. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. We'll see you next week. See you. Bye. Click. Let's get into what we want to talk about today. We want to stay in the line of mental health awareness, as May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we kicked off last week's episode obviously with an extremely powerful message, and we just want to kind of continue that train here. And since we gave you a life update, we talked to 2 other people who were doing something very powerful. Let's get personal, and I think we're going to start talking about some mental health things that you and I have been through
Yeah,
and struggled and worked with.
our own journeys here. So I just had my monologue. Bobby, do you want to kick it off and kind of just talk about the journey of mental health within yourself?
Yeah. It's gonna be tough to talk about. I've had some events in my life occur that I will get into at some point on this platform that really triggered what is, probably at the forefront of mental health, which is depression. And I never once experienced depression in my entire life up until this point. And like I said, an event occurred which really set the foundation for depression and anxiety as well. Um, and I wasn't really aware of where I was at. I was very lost as a person, as just a human being, as a student, as a son, as a brother, as a friend. I was far from myself.
Can I ask how old you were?
Uh, 20, 20, I think I was 20,
Okay.
19, 20-ish, around
Okay.
that time frame.
And this is the first time I'm hearing this too.
Yeah. And so like those events happened that really kind of, like I said, set that foundation. And then another event happened, and that was like the realization. That event I will never speak of.
Okay, so did you know something was up before that second
I
trigger?
um yes, I did. I knew I knew I was hurting. I knew the anxiety was there after the first event.
Which
I
we will talk about at some
Which I
point.
will 100% talk about at some point. I knew that was there. I knew the anxiety. I reckon that was very recognizable. Um,
And rightfully so. Once you guys you'll
yeah.
get it.
So that's where that started. The depression, not so much. It was after the second event where I was like, "Fuck!" Like
And
there's something wrong.
how much time was between the two?
Um, 8 months.
Okay.
Not even. Probably less. I would say less than eight. Between 4 to 8 months. And after that second event, I was like, there's something wrong. Like I am just, like I said, so utterly lost. And I want to talk about, there's 2 points that I want to touch on as far as like my story. And one was the medication. So I did get medicated for depression and
And this was
anxiety.
after event number 2.
This was, I believe so, if my
Okay.
timeline's correct in my head.
Can you like paint us a picture of like what your life was like? Like, where were you living? Like
I
what were
was
you
at,
doing?
I was still at Bloomsburg. I was living by myself because of first event. I was sober. I wasn't drinking at all in college at Bloomsburg.
This is what, spring semester? Or fall, okay.
Fall. And
So
I
we're
was
in junior year?
my junior year.
Okay.
Yeah. I was in a relationship, which was a good one. Hindsight 2020, it was a good relationship, but at the time, was pretty unhealthy for me at that time in my life. Not obviously not realizing that until later, but we're still friends. Actually, talked the other day. She's a great girl, but
She's super hot too.
what's that?
She's super hot too.
Yeah, she is.
Bobby always dates really hot girls. I'm just gonna throw that out there. So shout out to his exes. Y'all look good. Anyway.
but yeah, so that was pretty toxic. It was pretty weighing on me, and
I didn't know that.
yeah, it was pretty bad. And then, so I was living like I said, I was living by myself. I was on medication.
Did she know that you were medicated?
Um, yes,
Okay.
yeah. I think I'm pretty sure she did. I'm pretty sure I told her. But my experience with the medication is this: hindsight 2020, I think I had a sugar pill. I think it was a placebo.
I don't think that they do that.
Uh,
Just so we're clear, I,
uh,
I really don't think that that's legal.
I have no idea. You know
I
what I
mean,
mean?
I'm sure that it's not.
Uh,
It's fully illegal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they'll get it. They can. Medical industry is a sham. They can get away with anything. But
But that just could have not been the right medication for you, which is very possible.
well, what's funny is it didn't not work, but it didn't work. If that makes sense.
How long
Like
were you on it?
a couple months.
Okay, so
Yeah,
you should have felt some kind of
yeah.
change.
And again, I wasn't drinking on it or anything like that. But I just remember. I just like I said, hindsight 2020. I'm like, I feel like I just got a sugar pill. Who knows? Maybe I did. Maybe I didn't. But I would like to just address like the medication side of like depression. I'm not anti-medication. If you need it, you need it. And because some people's brains just don't fire the way that they're intended to, and that's okay. Um, but I went to a doctor feeling these feelings, and the first step was here's a bottle of pills.
How
And
many sessions had you had before that
as far as what,
with the therapist?
I zero,
Are you serious?
zero, zero.
Wait, are you serious? I didn't know
0.
that.
Yeah, 0. I
Did you
didn't.
get this medicine from a medical doctor or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
psychiatrist?
The doctor,
Psychologist. I forget which one can prescribe, but you know what I mean.
doctor. Yeah, doctor.
So you didn't even go to a therapist of any kind.
No,
Oh my God.
and that's where
I didn't know
I
that.
yeah, I went right to my doctor. Who she's a great doctor. She's
Right.
awesome, but I just think
Well, you
that
trust her. I'm sure that's why you were like, okay, if you think
also
so.
never did this before. I
Right.
never felt this way. So I was like,
Did you also go to a therapist after that?
no, I didn't see a therapist till the beginning of 2020.
What?
Yeah. And that's like one of the points I
Oh
want to
my
hone in on
God.
is I went right to medication. And this is all hindsight, this is my experience. Had wish I had tried different avenues before medication.
Absolutely.
And I'm lucky that my medication either wasn't high dosage, possibly sugar pill, like, placebo kind of thing. It may have been, I don't know. I'm not a
I'm
doctor.
going to go on record and say that that's illegal. So I think that it's probably just the wrong medication for you. Or I think a lot of times you need a combination of both. Like a pill sometimes is just not enough. So I have to wonder if you
Well,
had done both,
I think a lot of it is, I mean, we talked about it with Joe, is like your mind is an extremely powerful thing. And that's why I wonder if it was a sugar pill. It's like, okay, well, I'm taking this pill, it's going to make me feel better. And it's allowing my mind to actually just heal itself when it's actually, there's nothing else
Right.
doing it.
Hmm.
But that idea of taking something to make me feel better or whatever, to make my brain work a little bit better, um, that that's the only reason why I think maybe it was just something that either wasn't powerful at all, or just, like I said, was a placebo. I don't know. Again, I don't know. But I just wish I had approached that situation a little differently. And I think I'm not trying to go down the road of like, vaxxers, anti-vaxxers, like that kind of thing. Like I I think you should try like would it be a holistic approach?
I think it's just a different approach because I think a big thing with depression is there's
Don't
situational depression, and then there's chemical depression, which
mm,
it sounds like, and maybe you have both, but your situation was pretty fucked up at that time. And it's surprising that no one asked you, hey, is something going on right now that you want to talk about before
yeah.
just throwing pills down your throat? You know what I mean?
And that's just what I encourage. That's I'm not here to instill my beliefs on anybody, but I'm just going to tell you my situation and what you know, piece of advice. Try avoiding that as much as not as much as possible. If you need it, you need it. And I'm 120% okay with that. But approach it appropriately.
Well, I'm sure it's probably pretty defeating for you too that you had that moment of vulnerability where you reached out to someone for help. They gave you this option and it didn't really give you the results you were hoping for, I'm
I
assuming,
mean,
right?
I felt better, you know what I mean? And ultimately, obviously, I'm not on them anymore, haven't been on them since, but I just wish I would have tried something. It would have opened up my eyes to therapy a hell of a lot sooner. I could have, and then where would my life have been
Yeah.
from then? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? If I learned more about myself, and it didn't take till 29 years old to start, and the things that I went from, went through from 29 years old to 30, the most revolutionary year of my life, without a doubt, you know, maybe I would have learned more about myself. I would have learned more about love and relationships and professionalism, social aspects. Like I would have learned all these things possibly through therapy instead of just swallowing a pill.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing I want to speak to. The second thing I want to speak to is, and I don't really know where I want to go with it. I just kind of want to shed light on it.
That's all
Is
right. Take it away.
I talked to two therapists in my entire life, and both of them, in the very initial parts, within the first 2 or 3 sessions, they always ask, like, "Have you ever suffered from depression?" You're like, "Yeah." I mean, I think any normal human being, has suffered some sort of depressive state. And the question that usually follows that is like, "Have you ever thought about self harming or suicide?" And my response, and it might not be a normal response, it might be a irregular response, always plug, but was, "Yeah, haven't you?" You know,
That's such a Bobby answer if I
Y-
ever heard one.
yeah. And I'm like, "Haven't you?" Like, everyone's I've never had a bad day in my life, but I've had some really not good ones. And haven't you? Like, haven't you been like, "Man, today really sucks," or like, "This last week sucks," or even "This month sucks." And you're like, "Man, if I just cease to exist right now, would people show up to my funeral? Who would
Mhm.
show up?
Mhm.
Who would cry? Who wouldn't? Who would start a benefit after me? Who
Right.
would who would do something? Like, who would do what? Like,
Like, what would my legacy of some sorts be?
yeah." And the idea of just thinking like, I think it's ignorant to say that haven't thought about being a ghost at your own funeral.
Yeah.
You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I've thought about, like, I've even envisioned it, like, we're at the funeral home and there's the casket and people are going through, and I'm like, there's like this, I've had dreams about it. It's really weird. This, like, a not like a not an altar, but like I don't know, like the
Podium?
second, yeah, like a second floor, like a balcony. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I'm like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
ghost
Mhm.
standing at of the balcony, and I'm just like watching over it as,
Mhm.
and yeah, I've had these thoughts. I think any sane person has. I challenge anyone to say that you haven't thought about what it's like to die, and not specifically taking your own life, but like just not existing. And that's always been my response. And I haven't really gotten a response back from either one of the therapists that I've seen that's like been like, "Oh, okay," like validating. Like, yeah, I don't know if that's their job. Probably isn't, to answer that question. But so
Bobby goes to therapy and turns into the
yeah,
therapist.
right. So, but I just want to shed light because, like, I mean, I was there. You know what I mean? Like,
Can I ask you to open up a little bit about what you had said off air when
yeah,
you were in that dark place and like the situation you had there?
yeah. I just remember like driving back to school one weekend and just being like, "What if I just pull off the side of the road? Like, just pretend to fall asleep at the wheel. See ya. That's it. Looks like an accident. I don't have to answer any questions. Everyone just thinks that it's, everyone knows I'm in the car. So, oh, he was probably fucking street racing or doing something stupid, which is not far from the
Yeah.
possibility or whatever.
Mhm.
Not so much anymore, hashtag this is 30. But, you know, that's a thing I've started recently, by the way. But, you know, it's not far from the truth. So like I get it, but I was there. I was like, man, I don't want to go back to this place. It's a pain that I don't want to deal with anymore. And this looks like an accident. Turn the wheel to the right a little. You know what I mean? I never was gonna do it. I think it takes a courageous person to take their own life. I think,
I mean, it's hard to say, but I think that sentence. Please don't take it any certain way because I think I know what you mean by it, but
yeah,
it's got. I mean, being in that dark place, like it's got to be really, really bad, and
it-
that's.
absolutely. Yeah,
I think it's big of you to say that on air, so
I
thank you for sharing that.
yeah, yeah. I don't mean to enlighten or to give power to the say that someone who takes their own life is
Right, but
courageous.
that's not
That's
what
a
we're saying
negative.
at all.
That's a negative thing. It's a negative thing
Yeah.
that you're that deep into
Yeah.
something that, and you're so committed to something that is a uh, temporary or a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right. Hmm.
And but I was there, and I think I just want to. I guess the point that I'm trying to drive home with this is that if you've been there and you've thought about it, don't be ashamed to say that you've thought about it. I think every quote normal person has thought about what it's like to not exist.
But also, like, look at where you are now, and like we said, like having going through with those thoughts and having them are two very different things. And just be thankful and grateful that you weren't so deep that you felt like you could go through with it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And look at how much better things are now. Even if they're still not great, like you're still here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's why I've never had a bad day. I'm 6 feet up. I'm breathing. Apparently, there's a handful of people that like me. They showed up last night.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
baby.
But
I thought you just called yourself 6 feet tall. I was like,
I'm just shy. Six
um.
foot. 6 foot with boots. But I'm like, like I said, I'm 6 feet up. I'm alive. I'm breathing. Relatively healthy. No bad days. So like I can't. It's kind of scary and weird to like look back at that time of my life and be like, man, I can't believe you were there. Like you were there. Now we're here. It's different. And there's not anything that there wasn't like this crazy climax or pivotal moment that like changed it. It just changed.
Slowly but surely, it just gets better.
Yeah, it just changed. And then this last year was just fucking. It was a leap. A
Yeah.
leap. I'm going in the 30. Oh my gosh, probably one of the happiest people I've ever been. It's been a while since I've been happy. I was really happy. 29 was actually a happy year. I was a really happy person. 29 to 30. Going into 30, it's just only up, right?
Well, I feel like you know yourself a lot more now than you did a year ago because
Absolutely.
you went through some tough defining moments that really made you answer questions about who you are, what you want, where you want to go.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe mistakes you've made, things that you've done well, things you haven't done well.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's been a year of growth.
amen.
A year of growth. So, not to be depressed, but holy shit, that was a lot. I didn't really ever think about that I was going to talk about that.
Well, I think it's big. I think it's important.
Yeah. You could have asked me October 6th, I think is when we dropped our first 5 episodes. And if you asked me then, like if I would have ever talked about that moment in my life, I probably would have said, no, well, I don't really need to. And I think it goes to a lot of like what you say, where mine was very short term. Not very short. It was shorter than what most people go through when they go through anxiety, big depression periods. But I was like, oh, well, mine's short. It was easy. You know what I mean? And you always say like, just because you think it's easy doesn't mean, or like, yours isn't as difficult as somebody else's, doesn't mean that it didn't hurt you just as much or
Yes,
whatever.
yes.
You have like a phrase that you say.
I can't even think of it. Basically, just don't diminish your own experiences because they aren't, quote, as bad as somebody else's.
Yeah, exactly.
Because pain is pain and it hurts.
Yeah.
You can't ever compare your pain to somebody else's because you'll never know what it feels like. If it hurt that bad to you, that's all that matters.
Yeah. So I'm kind of in a weird spot now that we've had this conversation. I'm feeling some type of way, but it is what it is. Like I'm now, like I said, that growth from 29 to 30, I'm okay with sharing that story. You asked me when I was 28, probably not.
Well, it's big.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a big growth period. I think
Yeah.
I've talked briefly about my own experience with depression. But I think, I feel similarly to you in that everybody kind of goes through it in some way. If you don't, God bless, and I'm so happy for you.
You're fortunate.
I'm sure you have other things that you struggle with as well, but in my family particularly, I'll say my sister she didn't inherit the depression gene. That girl is just a mover and a shaker, and she doesn't let things get her down. And so my brother, my mother, and I suffer from depression. We have pretty much since we can remember. It's so interesting. She tries so hard My sister tries so hard to be supportive of us when we go through our little bouts of depression, and she's gotten a lot better at it over the years, but she just straight up says, like, I don't know how to be there for you because I just can't imagine what you're going through, what that must feel like. And
Yeah.
it's so crazy as someone who goes through it to imagine a person that can't go there in their head. Like, I'm like, wow, like that's good for you, dude. Like, I know she has plenty of her own things that she deals with that I'm sure that I can't understand,
But
but
she doesn't know what it's like to be in the shadow realm,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. I remember my little brother, and this is kind of like wrapping in what you had talked about. My little brother, God bless his soul, that he struggles hard with depression, and he has since he was like too young to be dealing with it, like 11 or 12 years old, before he even knew what it was really.
Hmm.
So he's been depressed for a while, and I'll say this: I think depression comes in bouts. Like you'll be okay and then not okay.
Yeah, there's highs and lows.
His baseline is not great, so his lows are really, really low.
Hmm.
And a lot of
I think that's a good point to make, like your baseline.
yeah,
I think that's where people mistake being upset about
yeah,
something or being depressed. Those are
right,
very,
yeah,
although very interchangeable terms,
yeah.
but very, very, very different.
And
Couldn't be further from the truth.
absolutely, and I'll
Yeah.
say until you've been depressed, you probably won't know.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
you're depressed, you'll know.
Yeah.
You'll definitely know.
Absolutely. And that starts like at what you said, at that baseline.
Right.
Yeah.
When you're operating day to day low and then you get to the dark places, it's just like a whole different
And
kind of
and
low.
and the inverse of that is when you've never experienced depression, your baseline's very high. So then when you go down, you think it's the end of the world because your baseline's been
Yeah.
so high, and you're
Mhm.
like, slow down. Not again, not to diminish your pain,
Right.
but it's like this is very, very different than what you really think it is. You know?
Right. And so I think a lot of my family, I mean, growing up, when you're a kid and something doesn't go the way that it should, things feel really big when you're little. So I think a lot of his woes growing up, we kind of diminished as him being a little bit dramatic or whatever. And he started talking about suicide really young, like maybe probably when he was 16 he started, and he really hasn't stopped since then. He's 25 now. He talks about it differently now because he's older and he understands.
More aware.
Yeah, so but I remember he's always said the same thing about it. And back before, I really didn't get it, and I think I thought he was being dramatic and just trying to get attention from people. But he always would say, I don't want to kill myself, but I want to die. And I was like, what does that even mean? Like what do you mean by that? I don't get it. And it just felt like you just want someone to feel bad for you. And I remember like saying that to him a couple of times. Actually, probably many of times. And in hindsight, that's probably the worst thing anyone can say to anyone when they're expressing any kind of suicidal ideation at all. So, like, fuck me. I'm sorry, brother, if you're listening to this. Like, I can't apologize enough for saying that. And here's why. I talked a little bit about a year ago where I was mentally, and it was the first time I've been dealing with depression on and off since I was 15, but it was the first time that I ever like fully understood what he meant by that. Because I remember thinking every day for probably a good month and a half, like, I just want this to be over. Like, I just can't fucking do this anymore. I don't want,
I'm exhausted.
exactly. I'm just so fucking tired of being alive. Like, and I would say that, and I would say it like, people, how are you? I'm like, I'm just fucking tired of being alive. And I would say it like a joke, but I was so fucking serious. Like,
Yeah.
and I remember calling him and just being like, I'm so sorry for not getting it because now I get it. And with how low I feel right now, this is the first time I've ever felt this. I'm 28. I have a lot more tools to deal with it now than I ever did. And I still feel like this. I can't imagine being 15 years old in high school and feeling like this, and then having everybody telling you that you're lying. Like,
Hmm.
it's a really low place to be. But in the same breath, not actually carrying it out, like you and I had said earlier, is like that's how you know things get better. And like you haven't
Hmm.
really hit that dark place. But I think it's interesting because my family and I've had this debate a few times. My mom thinks that suicide is so selfish and she gets like pissed off about it. She's like, how could anyone ever do that to their parents? How could anyone do that to their family or their, their wife, whoever it may be? Like, she gets pissed off at people who commit suicide, whereas my brother and I, like, we've been there, and like knowing how desperately, desperately sad and exhausted you are, that I've been in the place where I've wanted to be dead, but I have been like, okay, well, I'm not going to do it though. If you're that bad that you actually do it, like, oh my God, how that must be the worst place to be.
Yeah, and I mean I might get some shit for this, but I agree with your mom to a degree. I don't think they're mutually exclusive feelings where like, oh, it's selfish and how could you do this to your family and blah blah. I agree with that, but you also have to understand the other side of it.
Right. Like,
I agree. It is selfish. You're like I said earlier, it is a life will get better. Okay. I promise you, it will happen.
but you know from being in that
But
dark
I know
place.
what it's
Yeah.
like when you're there. It doesn't feel like that. And I can totally understand why the selfishness is irrelevant.
Because
It's
you're not
utterly
thinking
irrelevant.
rationally. You're not
No.
operating at a normal person's
It's
brain.
little inside joke between me and Wagner or whatever. Your synapses aren't synapting. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
it's just which basically in funny terms, your brain is not firing on all 8 cylinders.
Right.
It's just not firing the way that it should. And it's like
When you're
I
in that,
understand it is. It at the end of the day, it is cowardly. It is selfish. But I understand why those adjectives are utterly irrelevant to what
mhm.
decisions you're making. It irrelevant. They
At that
don't
point,
exist.
it's a struggle to even wake up, get out of bed, and then make it through the day. Like even that feels like impossible some days, right? When you're that
Liv,
low.
episode 19, Liv said that. She goes, there are some people that just waking up and taking a shower is an accomplishment
Right.
in their day
Mhm.
because of how dark, how deep down they are into like what I said earlier in that shadow realm. They are so down there that getting up and taking a shower, that's it.
Right.
That's it.
Mhm.
That's it. That's a win. That's a W in their book. And you're like sitting there thinking, there's other people who are like, I shower 60 times a day. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
Right.
I'm
Good for
great.
you.
Yeah,
Like
good for you. Like, well, no, this is great. So, like I said, I totally, it's the whole point of this podcast is I don't have to agree. I don't have to disagree. You just have to understand. I totally understand where your mom's coming from.
right, because she's probably never been in that dark place. So
And
how would
yeah,
she even know?
exactly, but you also have to understand the opposite side.
Right.
You have to
Mhm.
understand the inverse
Mhm.
of everything. There's my roommate talks about it all the time. When you do research, the way you should do research isn't to you have a theory and you go and prove that theory. The way you do research is to try and prove your theory wrong. You
Hmm. Interesting.
find out this is my theory. Go find evidence proving me wrong first
Okay.
and you go from there. So you always have to look at the inverse or the
Right.
devil's advocate or whatever it is. You
Mhm.
always have to look at the inverse side of things. So I agree to disagree to agree
Right.
with your
No,
mom.
I
You know what I
actually
mean?
understand exactly what you're
Makes
saying.
no sense, but I get you.
But I think it's important to know both sides of that argument too.
Absolutely.
And I guess the whole moral of this story is uh we've both been there in pretty dark places. I'm assuming a lot of people have as well. I can't speak for everyone. Like we said, people like my sister love her to death. She has her own demons, but she's never been there.
Hmm.
I thank people like her for acknowledging, like, I don't know what you're going through and
I
I'm so
understand that.
sorry.
I understand that I don't
Right,
understand.
right. And that she
Yeah.
tries to understand.
Hmm.
And knowing that, like, even her best attempt at getting it, she's never really gonna get it. But I
Yeah.
appreciate that she even just saying that kind of makes me feel like, okay, well, I thank you for acknowledging that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
I agree. And I think a lot of people have been there. And I think it's, again, we always plug therapy. You talk about it.
Whenever you're ready, though.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty liberating to speak to these things, even if it's not to a professional. We talked about you know recently having a friend just come out and be like, dude, I fucking need you. Sometimes you need that in a person. You know what I mean? And everyone has a person. That's the one thing I
Hmm.
also do want to say. Everyone has a person. You can think you are the biggest introvert on the planet, but that you have a person. You have someone. One thing I will say is that we do not make it through this life alive, and we don't make it through it alone. You have to do it. You know what I mean? You're ultimately we're all gonna die, right? That's it.
Okay, I get it. I was
Ultimately,
so
we're
confused for a second, but I'm
yeah.
also very tired.
You
So
gotta yeah. So we're all gonna die. So
right.
that's the only thing that we actually know on this earth for sure is that we are gonna die. You
Right.
know what I mean?
hmm
So that's a fact. The other thing too is we don't make it through this life alone.
But I think an important thing to point out in that is that I can say personally, I have friends who don't have a quote person, and I'll say this, it's because they are not comfortable opening up. And I
hmm
think that's its own issue.
They think they don't have a person. They
Right.
do.
They
They
could
do.
if they would allow
Yes.
somebody if they would let somebody in. And
Yes.
then that's not saying like just talk about it. Like, what do you mean? Just talk about it. I know it's probably there's reasons why people don't want to talk about things. That's a whole other episode, but maybe just here's some encouragement. I know you're not going to listen to this podcast if you're a closed off person and be like, you know what? Today I'm going to talk to someone. But maybe hoping we can plant the seed a little bit.
Yeah. Let something manifest.
hmm
If this like I said, our job is every episode if one person is affected by it.
Right. It's our goal. Yeah, for sure.
One, I don't care. I don't give a shit if fucking Barstool calls us and we become multi-million. I don't care. And that would be great because
I
then
was
we
going to say,
can.
I would care. That'd be great.
I mean, don't get me wrong. It'd be great. But at the end of the day, because we would be able to impact more people. I think that's awesome. But at the end of the day, my goal is one person.
Right.
If I did that, I can go to sleep. Well, I don't
I was
sleep.
going to say,
I could try to sleep with a smile on my face and a full heart,
Mhm.
knowing I did what I'm supposed to do.
Or what we set out to do
Yeah,
every
you know,
episode.
and that's okay, and that's where we'll leave it.
Yeah, and that's good.
Yeah. On that note, as always, you guys know what to do. Feel free to follow the Irregular Instagram page at Irregular Podcast. Also, follow my personal page if you would like at Yobob, EYOOO_BOB.
And my personal Instagram page at Katie_ANI. It's KAITY_ANI. We have a pretty good month coming up for you guys. We look forward to upcoming guests and bringing some new stuff to you. But as always, we're looking for guests. If you have something you'd like to talk about, something that you're passionate about, a struggle, a unique experience, hit us up.
We're always open. DMs never close.
Our DMs have been popping lately.
Yeah.
I'm so excited about it.
Yes, they never close. There are no operating hours for the DMs. They are always open.
I love that.
So, on that note, we will talk to you next Thursday. Love you.
Love you guys.